Hello everyone. Before we start today's video, if you could all do me a solid and lightly tap the like button, perhaps share the video about and leave a comment. If you are not subscribed, subscribe as well. It would greatly help this channel. Thank you very much. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's log. Subdates 221026.8. Payday has come around and I've decided to preempt Christmas by getting gifts now. All NPC crew, for example, are getting doggy chews from Poundland. A stocking shaped bags to Maltese? Yeah. Crewman Bork is getting an IOU for last year's IOU. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'd like to talk about, again, Just Stop Oil, for two reasons. One, because the views on it are reasonably good on this channel. I'm okay with this. And two, because of the persistent protesting that has gone on for almost 30 days. To an extent you can say, give them credit, they have the balls to keep doing this time and time again. Yes, nothing reeks of standing up for the voiceless and the planet more than getting yourselves arrested over and over again for criminal damage. And for getting your point across, which I found another bone of contention with, because you're complaining about, a lot of them are, poverty being a major contributing factor for a lot of inequality in this country. Yet you have such a vast amount of resources available to you, you're able to acquire the toppest of tierest of all paints. I assume you go to Homebase and colour match it with other things you've defiled. The majority of these incidents are taking place in London, and the reason why is because if you can cripple certain aspects of London, you could in effect cripple the rest of the country. London's finance sector, for example, is remarkably powerful. Thankfully, a lot of them use the tube to get to and from work. So instead it is because they make money, better to attack things they might enjoy in their free time. Art being the obvious one. Earlier this week we spoke about a similar incident in Germany on a Monet, and this is all quite interesting because you don't see Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain operate outside of that city. And there's a reason why. Because if they did it anywhere else, no one would care about assault. They'd beat the living bejesus out of them and they know it. But also because the vast majority of these people who are complaining about protecting the planet don't live in London. They live in really nice ivory towers. We have discussed more recently how they do actually have people who work for them. A business, a non-profit of course, but it's still a business nonetheless where they even sell their own merch. And this I find quite amusing because they've got to raise the money to do these protests and pay for respective bails. So they can continue to waste food that we're supposed to run out of in 2050. So they can continue to waste it on paint. How do you make those paints again? And also, a lot of the arguments center around we need to stop our use of oil immediately. The problem with that is, based on what we use oil for outside of the obvious internal combustion engine, oil is vastly important in medicine and in many other areas of this planet where we actually still need it, because science hasn't pushed far enough ahead yet where we could find a way forward. Now you could argue, but what about the more not medicine in the slightest things? Like herbal remedies, soothing medicaments. You know, not real medicine, but people believe it enough like a placebo that it totally cures them. It doesn't. One can argue some does work, of course. There are some medicinal properties to antiquated medicines, but they're antiquated for a reason. We are trying to push forward, not take many steps back and stagnate. The UK government's current belief is we should push with offshore wind and nuclear, and I can fully agree with that. There are many who don't agree with having wind farms on UK soil. I kinda disagree with it. I do think we may get to a point where we will need that, especially if we can't push forward with nuclear. But until such a time where all of those have been fully introduced and we are no longer reliant and dependent on oil, which is a slow process, this is going to be something that's going to be quite irritating and amusing at the same time for quite some time. So more recently, Just Stop Oil got themselves into, again, trouble. Day 26 of the protests, they've decided the best way to hammer those who really benefit from this inequality by making themselves richer are those who are able to buy things like Bugattis, Ferraris, and Bentleys. So in Berkeley Square, I don't even know where that is, they attack and sprayed paint all over the showrooms. Did they go inside or was it all outside? Because based on what I'm seeing, it's all exterior damage. A window cleaner can get in there fast and deal with it, to be honest. Understandably, the person you see in this picture got arrested. What a shame. Her point has really been driven home. Based on what I'm seeing, and if you're trying to be as eco-friendly as you claim, I have no doubt that can all be wiped off within an hour. But it wasn't the only place they went. You see, other Just Stop Oil protesters decided they needed to go to the headquarters of one of the climate change skeptic lobby groups. The two protesters who went to the showroom in London in Berkeley Square are Emma Brown and Carmen Lean, who travelled from Scotland to carry out this stunt that demands that the government in turn halts all new oil and gas licenses and consents, with the Met later confirming 2 had been arrested for criminal damage by saying that protesters have sprayed paint at the Ferrari and Bentley garages in Berkeley Square at 8:30. Met officers rapidly arrived at 8:46, that is not rapid, arrested 2 people for criminal damage, and they've been taken into custody, no doubt released with bail. Carmen Lean is an architecture student from Glasgow and has said, "We pay exorbitant bills for oil and gas, but it's nothing compared to the price our kids will pay for it. New oil and gas is a death sentence for people all around the world. You can throw us in prison, but it won't stop our outrage at this government throwing millions of people under the bus. We are not asking for no new oil, we're demanding it. This government is using the crisis to push through more austerity on one hand and new oil licenses on the other. Both are unalive sentences. If this government cared about people, they would be insulating homes, investing in affordable public transport, and massively scaling up renewables." Emma Brown, also from Glasgow by the way, said, "We have come down from Scotland to demand this toxic government in Westminster do another U-turn, this time on our broken energy system. Get your hands off our North Sea oil and rapidly upscale the renewable energies that will prevent catastrophic climate breakdown and reduce our bills. This is the immediate action we need to help the cost of living and the climate crisis. No more oil for billionaires to profit from." Just want to add, first, to make solar panels, which would be a huge gift to this country, aren't as effective year-round, only really beneficial in the late spring, early autumn, mostly summer. Based on kilowatt per hour usage of a household, you would have to have a lot of solar panels on your roof to even cancel out your average daily usage. But also they're environmentally unfriendly to make. You would know this by now. Affordable public transport. What a novel idea. We had to sell them off because we had to abide EU rules. We had to abide them, and then we couldn't maintain them to certain standards, much like water, which we really should buy back. I still think we should get the rails back as well. Problem is, there is no version of a reality where we could have public transport for all, ban all cars, and have it functioning in such a way that everyone was able to get to and from where they needed to go without inconveniencing each other. It's not possible, it's not feasible. And you might argue money in this aspect, but really, austerity had to happen. There was no money left and our budget deficit was so bad the net interest on that was killing our country. A Treasury Minister in 2010, Labour, when they left, wrote, "There is no money left." Gordon Brown sold our gold reserves at their lowest possible value when they were worth tens of billions. There is no version of a government really that can solve this problem without thinking long-term and slowly. Instant reaction does not achieve definite long-term results. Now, to switch to the other instance I mentioned, the Global Warming Policy Foundation, the GWPF, the Skeptic Climate Change Group. Their place is in Westminster on Tufton Street. The spray paint came as part of a wider protest, which in turn saw 6 protesters block Horseferry Road. Some protesters used a solvent to glue themselves onto the tarmac in the roads, while others locked themselves together. In this, you see taxi drivers driving over the pavement because they laid in the middle of the road. 1 person was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage, 7 on suspicion of willful obstruction of the highway. The protester, who threw the paint, was identified by Just Stop Oil as a normal guy from South London, and he only attacked the property in an attempt to fight big oil, famine, pestilence and war. How about spending that money less on paint and using it to donate to a food bank? But now here's the part where I get to introduce people that back them. Some monetarily and some because they believe what they're doing is, and I'll quote them, clever. So the first is Eileen Getty, courtesy of The Guardian. "I fund climate activism and I applaud Van Gogh's protest. The 2 climate activists who threw soup on the protective glass covering of the sunflower painting have captured the attention of the world. While some have ridiculed the activists as a funder of climate activism, I am proud of the bigger conversation they have started." Yes, the bigger conversation of, should we all be stockpiling Heinz soup now so it doesn't get wasted? And this next one is partly a joke. Let's see if you can work out which part. a discussion on privileged white girls and their, well, place in this world when they should be working. Note here, I said working. I did not say in the kitchen cooking that soup they wasted, because I'm not a misogynist. When I first saw the video, my first reaction was shock. Throwing soup on a beloved painting was a desperate move. What could possibly motivate a young person to do such a thing? I'd argue a lack of appreciation of our own history because it's so desperate to destroy it and repeat the same mistakes. This is where we find ourselves after decades of mostly incremental activism, which has brought us to the point of a collapsing planet, engulfed in flame and drought and burning to the ground. Activists are trying everything they can to get our attention. How far is too far to get the attention of people in immediate danger? I am the daughter of a famous family who built their fortune on fossil fuels. But we now know that the extraction and use of fossil fuels is killing life on our planet. Our family sold that company 4 decades ago, and I vowed to use my resources to take every means to protect life on Earth. I proudly provide funding to the Climate Emergency Fund, which in turn makes grants to climate activists engaged in non-violent legal civil disobedience, which includes Just Stop Oil, the group the activists represented. I do not fund these groups directly. The skirting of responsibility with semantics, I love it. The young activists rightly guessed that targeting a famous painting, familiar and personal to many of us, would strike a nerve. Yes, the wrong one. Because people are less inclined to talk about the climate change emergency and more interested in finding out if we can do more to protect paintings that are well and truly priceless and indicative of our rather rich history. And while it is fantastic you are using the resources given to you by your family who had extracted fossil fuels from this earth, you have forgotten how dependent so much of this world is on fossil fuels still. You are not going to impact as much change as you think you are in a country like the United Kingdom. We are far too small. You need to make change elsewhere. The problem is, you seem to be under this delusion, many do in fact, that the UK could in turn influence America. Are you out of your mind? There is no chance of that. Their country is going to collapse because of their own economy, which will happen long before any issues with fossil fuels arise, even when they are tapping into their reserves before the midterms coincidentally. Now the article continues essentially paying lip service to a number of issues, while also not really providing anything useful to explain justification for these more violent actions. So instead we're going to go to somebody else that backs them and believes that they are clever. Bob Geldof, who believes that these people are 1000% right in their actions, because annoying is quite good, with his exact quote being, "The climate activists are 1000% right, and 1000% I support them. It is offensive to destroy Van Offen's genius. That achieves nothing, but it was clever to throw it on the glass knowing it wouldn't be destroyed. I doubt for a second they thought that. I doubt that for a second. I do not believe they would have known that ahead of time. I think they did it because they knew no one was paying any attention when they were gluing themselves to the framing, or when they were using pictures and sticking it to the frame around a rather large painting. I think they knew nothing." But he further continued by saying, "That's just annoying, and annoying is quite good. I was driving to Hyde Park when Extinction Rebellion people blocked it and I was effing furious. But I wasn't railing against them. I was thinking, if I was 18, would I be there? And the answer is yes. You were driving. Annoying people into policy change may not work. Does that mean I'm against their passion, their anger, their bravery? No. Would I put up with it? They're not killing anyone. Climate change will." What I love is, a lot of the instances that many latch onto as indicative of extreme climate change aren't actually that at all. For example, California fires. That's not climate change. That's some dickhead making a poor decision many years ago and you still paying the price for it. You can't use the hurricanes that hit Florida on a semi-regular basis, because they've been doing that for years. It's always been happening. You can't use the extreme heat that we had for 2 days this year. Two fecking days. You can instead criticize the fact that when people needed a toilet or shade, or somewhere cool to go, there was no option because we, the United Kingdom, don't have air conditioning. And if we did, the electricity bill would go through the roof even further because of it. Mentioning the cost of oil going up is because we used to have deals with countries we now do not deal with, because they are committing acts of actual violation of human rights. And it turns out, in some instances, we, the United Kingdom, will actually bother to not work with them. I find it hilarious that somebody like Bob Geldof agrees with them, while he himself admitted them getting in his way when he was driving was effing annoying. It's hilarious. Then again, this is the same guy who tried to block Brexit with boats. I'm not even kidding, he really tried this shit. It was hilarious. The last part of this video I'd like to talk about is an interview given to Euronews Culture, an interview by a Just Stop Oil activist. In an article written by David Murakwan, have you been inspired by other non-violent civil resistant movements for Just Stop Oil? Of course, because massive resistance is how women got the vote, how African Americans got the vote, how we got health and safety laws in the UK, as well as gay rights. All of this has come from massive resistance, and that is why it's so important. We take inspiration from them and follow the same sort of tactics. For example, the suffragettes slashed paintings and quite violently destroyed them. That's why they are considered terrorists by some, even with the results of what they achieved. The pouring of soup over the painting or spray painting of Harrods have been some of the most successful actions that you've had. Certainly the ones that have garnered the most media attention. How do you respond to those who call this obnoxious vandalism or who question the relevance of the painting, for instance, in the fight against climate change? The answer is, a lot of people are saying we're alienating members of the public, but actually the head of BP says he has more cash than he knows what to do with during the cost of living crisis. People can't afford to heat up a tin of soup, the government are seeking to accelerate fossil fuel production, which will kill millions of people, and are failing to address the worst cost of living crisis this country has ever seen. It's not a very good answer. Next question. Is anything off limits? Of course it is. We are a non-violent movement, we're peaceful protesters. We will cause disruption, we will attack paintings and art. But we are only doing this until the government make a meaningful statement about ending new fossil fuel assets in the UK. As soon as that happens, we're off and we move out the way. Since you're attacking art, do you consider culture to be meaningless at this point? There's still a place for culture. Art has a lot of power. There are people who are more outraged about that action than the 33 million people in Pakistan being displaced by floods. I'm from Scotland. That's 6 times the population of my entire country. Interesting deflection. Although Scotland's quite welcoming, you sure you don't want to welcome them there? We don't mind. We'll happily give you your severance pay as well if you want. Now, I noticed as I went through more and more of these questions that the person they were interviewing was giving up their PhD essentially because this was to them more important. That's understandable, very understandable. They are also questioned about being bankrolled by the Climate Energy Fund, which includes Eileen Getty, who is, I now know this, the goddaughter of the oil tycoon Paul Getty. And the one thing I really liked about all the answers was just how bad they were, using not necessarily a false equivalence, but an extreme somewhere else to be an indicator that we here need to impact the change there. But we can't impact that change. We don't have an influential voice like many seem to think. We could have. We lost it in the EU, which is another reason we wanted to leave. Of course, many forget that, 1 million more people voted to leave than remain. Not that that matters, am I right? You also accept, within this interview, that no government is tackling this in the way it should be. Coordinated levels of action and climate justice, and there's a reason for that. A global issue like this, you would think they'd unite and resolve it together. The problem is, some of the biggest contributors to global pollution refuse to acknowledge that it's a problem, and they are not the United Kingdom. 2 of the biggest names are India and China. I think Russia might be up there as well, and they are unlikely to change with Xi Jinping the Pooh Bear, Emperor Xi Jinping the Pooh Bear, and Vladimir, I swear he's dying sometime soon, Putin, being completely unwilling to talk about a problem that needs resolving under their own little totalitarian regimes. Delusional and blinded. You were willing to throw Pakistan in with displacement because of floods, but you ignored neighbours not so far away who are completely unwilling to help or play ball.